everyone. My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are going to be doing another more opinion-based video talking about dominance, and in particular trying to answer the age-old question of if being a dominant is something that you are or something you can be taught how to be. And I think you all will be surprised by the answer and conclusion I come to here, at least if you have been watching my videos for a while. So this should be an interesting thought journey. So this isn't necessarily going to seem connected at first, but I promise it makes sense. So a long time ago, I made a video talking about Blair White, in particular Blair's reaction to a person that is a puppy player that had done a documentary here on YouTube. And as part of that reaction and critique, there was a lot of conversation around the use of the term identify in BDSM spaces, like I identify as a little, I identify as a brat or as a puppy. And that really got me thinking down this pathway of how so often the things that we do in kink can also be seen as a reflection of our true selves and who we really are on the inside. And in that video, I spent a lot of time talking about how Tony, the puppy player, doesn't literally believe they're actually a dog trapped in a human's body, which is kind of what Blair took out of the video for some reason. If you guys want to watch that, I'll link it down below. I won't get into too much more detail than I have to right now to explain this, but they don't believe they are transcendentally a dog. That wasn't the point of what they were doing. They were engaging in role play, and that role play has a separation between your real self and who you are on an everyday basis and the role you are choosing to engage in. Even if you very strongly identify as a pet or as a puppy, it's not something that you have no control over. And I think having that separation is really easy when you have examples of very clear role play. Like, most people that do pet play do not literally believe they are actually animals. They know that they are humans choosing to pretend to be something else to have an enjoyable experience. But thinking more about that logic doesn't as easily apply to people that identify as being dominant or submissive, because you do have a lot of people that do see being dominant or being submissive as being a core true fact that they cannot change about who they are as people. I am dominant, I am submissive is much more common in language versus I identify as being a dominant or I identify as being a submissive. And I do think there is a linguistic difference there. And you know, this is something that I think ties into why we have language in the community. Like, for example, we have terms in the total power exchange community like slave heart, because being a slave is about being true to your heart, being true to the deepest level of who you are. Or you have people in the vows in their collaring ceremonies say things like they promise to serve for now and forever and beyond the grave, because that is how deep they feel and believe their servitude goes. And it could just be, you know, nice platitudes for the sake of ceremony, but I also know people for whom they really deeply feel that and believe that. They intend to serve because that is, again, a core part of who they are. And at the same time, you also have people that are like, I don't know, dominance is just kind of like a fun thing I do in the bedroom. Isn't that big of a deal? And having those two very different approaches to dominance mentally can create some community conflict. And I definitely don't want to discount that experience of dominance or submission being something that you are. This is something I have waffled about over the years about, you know, is all BDSM kind of just really elaborate role play, because there are a lot of legal and moral and social reasons for why there are limitations on how sort of true these relationships can really be. So, for example, in the United States, you cannot legally own another person, and so how true and how deep can your slavery really be if what you are doing would not be recognized by the legal system? And of course, that's a whole other conversation, and it is a thought that I definitely have gone back and forth on and changed my opinion about, like, probably at least 4 times at this point, because that waffling is really something that goes along with my own process of trying to understand how I relate to my own submission. Am I submissive because it is something that I am really, truly, deeply am, and I couldn't change even if I wanted to? Or is it just like a fun thing I enjoy doing? Or is it something that, maybe is less of a specific preference for BDSM, but is simply just the easiest way to get my needs met in an intimate relationship? And I definitely lean towards thinking that this is something that is a true core part of who I am that I couldn't necessarily change, but I don't necessarily know for sure, if I'm being honest. I can definitely see an argument or some component of every different thought I've had about it. And so I am not settled necessarily on a conclusion there. But getting away from my own personal experiences and more back into general observations, I think this is why we see a level of stratification between people who say, I am a dominant with capital letters, and people who say, dominance is just something that I do, if that distinction makes sense. Because then that ties back into this debate between being a dominant is something that you are just born as, or being a dominant is something that you can be taught how to be. Because depending on how you relate to the first 2 options, you are likely to have pretty strong opinions about the second set of options. Because obviously, if you are someone that is a capital letter I am a dom, it can seem kind of insulting to go, well, hey, as long as you can throw a flogger, congrats, you're a dom now. But on the other side, for people who think of dominance more as something that they do, it can seem like a ridiculously high bar to go, well, if you want to identify as a dom, it has to be something that is a very important core identity. And I would actually argue that for a lot of people, dominance is something that they have to learn, they have the capacity for. The number one most common example of this that I get all the time is when someone is in a vanilla relationship and then their partner says, hey, I'm actually submissive. I would love it if you would be my dom or my daddy or my master. Can we try a power exchange relationship? And the other person, without really having any other BDSM experience, goes like, yeah, sure, I guess I can try that. And you might look at that and go, well, that person doesn't have as much drive to be dominant, because if they were a real natural dom, they wouldn't need someone to prompt them to try out dominance. They would already know that's who they are. And I would actually say that, well, that doesn't mean they can't be a dom. Sometimes you have to be introduced to new ideas before you realize that they can be something that works for you. And it's okay to start your dominance from a place of somebody else bringing up the concept first. Because, for me, for example, I am polyamorous, and polyamory had to be introduced to me. It was not something that I ever considered was possible. I didn't know that you could have relationships that involved more than one person. I thought it had to be 1 + 1 = 2, and any other combination is just not even feasible. Not that it would be disastrous or immoral, but that it just wasn't something that humans could do, that it was possible to happen. But since I learned about the concept and I read about it, and I've been in polyamorous relationships for years, I know this is something that I can be. Am I as motivated to polyamory as other people that are trying to navigate 3- and 4-person relationships when they're in 8th grade? No, but that doesn't mean that I'm not poly just because someone else had to bring up the concept first for me to know that it was something that I could do. But I do want to quickly note here, because I realize, especially with the example I gave of the person introducing that they are submissive, that I am not saying that you can make someone be a dominant. This is very, very, very important. You cannot make a square peg fit into a round hole. You cannot make someone who is vanilla into a dominant. That is just not how things work, especially not in the long run. And you especially should not coerce someone into trying to be a dominant, because if they don't do that, the relationship is in jeopardy. That is not an ethical way to approach BDSM or to introduce the concept to a relationship. But what I am saying is that someone might learn through experience and trial and error that being a dominant can be something that they enjoy, that they want to have in relationships. What they need to have, what the heart of, I think, all of this really is there has to be a spark. There has to be some kind of little teeny tiny little kernel of interest that motivates them towards some kind of dominance. And this could be a really, really small little kernel that's been shoved in the back and ignored for so many reasons. Someone might not even know the thing that they're feeling, they're drawn to, is called dominance. They might not have the language for expressing what it is that they are desiring. They might not even realize that's what it is at all. They might think, okay, well, this could be dominance, but BDSM seems scary and bad, and I don't want to be a scary and bad person, and it doesn't, hitting your partner mean you're like a domestic abuser? Isn't violence towards women bad? And they have all of these social expectations and stigmas and misconceptions that can mean, even if they think they might have some tendencies, they shove it way in the back and ignore it and pretend it's not there. And sometimes what you need is someone to go, hey, I would be willing to explore this concept with you. Have you thought about this thing before? But there has to be at least a little bit of something internally steering them towards dominance, even if their dominance is starting out in a more untrained place compared to someone that has stronger natural inclinations. Because for me, I really only think there's a couple of things you have to have in order to start exploring dominance in a personal relationship. One, you have to consent to the experience. That's the most important. Two, you have to be able to find some kind of joy in the experience. Three, you have to be willing to learn. And four, you have to have that little teeny tiny spark of drive that I mentioned before. Because as long as you have that little tiny spark of internal drive that can be nurtured and you can find joy in doing BDSM, the rest is really just a matter of developing your skill set and gaining confidence and finding your own personal style, learning how to do things like give an order with authority or how to enforce rules. The rest of it is really just the same process that anyone has to go through, no matter their internal drive, when it comes to actually being able to start out with being a dominant. And I don't really think that the paths are really going to that different of a place. It's the route to get there that happens to look different, because for people that have a very strong natural drive towards dominance, that have all their relationships have that in some capacity, their dominance might basically start out as a big tree in their backyard. It's obvious, it's there, it doesn't need any help growing. You can go, oh yeah, that's dominance, that's what that is. Whereas, I think for a lot of people that have to learn about being a dom, what they start out with is more like a sapling. It has to be recognized and nurtured and cared for in order to eventually grow into that same big, strong oak tree. But at the end of the day, no matter what you are starting from, they both have the same spark. They both have that seed that has the capacity to grow into a tree of dominance. Whereas if someone is just vanilla and they don't have a seed there at all, it doesn't matter how much you water it or fertilize the soil or till the earth. You're never going to get a dominance tree out of it, because the spark, the initial thing that has to be there, is just simply not there. Now, I do want to make a distinction here about topping versus being a dom. I actually believe as long as you want to, anyone can learn the skills of being a top. Because what a top is just performing the actions in a scene. There is no sort of power connotation in that at all. It is the person who is throwing the flogger, the person who is using the whip. And actually, I think because anyone can learn the skills of being a top, I actually encourage switches and submissives, even if they don't plan to do that thing on other people, to learn how to do things from the top side for themselves, because it's a really good thing to do for your own safety, for vetting people, for making sure that the person you're playing with as a top to you actually knows what the heck they're talking about, and you're not putting yourself in an unknown amount of risk. Because topping, again, is just performing the actions of a scene. Whereas being a dom is about where you want to fall in a power structure. You want to be the one who is receiving power in a power exchange. You want to be the one who is getting the authority transferred to you. And topping doesn't have to do with any of that. There is certainly a strong correlation between people who are dominants and people who top, but there are also lots of people that top that never touch power. You have lots of people that are submissives that top occasionally. And that doesn't mean that they suddenly became a dom because they took a class and then now know how to throw a flogger. So I think that topping is definitely a skill that anyone can learn how to do, and it doesn't necessarily require that same level of spark. Now, I do want to go back and re-emphasize something. You cannot make someone be a dom. It is really important that you listen to this. This is like, even I think one of the most important things in this video. I am not giving you permission to go to your partner and say, oh, well, you like to be the one who pays for dinner when we go out, and so that means you're secretly a dom, and I've read all of the body language, and that means we just need to push you into being a dom hard enough so you'll learn how to do it. No. Again, you cannot make a square peg fit a round hole. You cannot make someone who is vanilla suddenly be kinky. I am talking about developing someone that is already kinky on the inside and helping them become more comfortable and helping them, combat internal stigma and misconceptions and fear and maybe even past trauma they might have to get over in order to feel comfortable being a dom. Like, you can help with that process of working through all of that existing stuff to get to dominance. But if someone's like, hey, I'm not into the concept of this, I never want to do this, that doesn't interest me, I don't feel comfortable being a dom, you have to listen to that. You can't go, oh, well, I just am so good at reading body language, and I can tell by the tone of your voice and the way you act doing this, that, and the other thing, that you are really meant to be a dom. And if I just drag it out of you hard enough, I can make you be my dom. Because I think there is a reluctance in a lot of relationships to admit when there is incompatibility between someone that is vanilla and someone that is not, because we don't really have open conversations about being kinky, especially, well, unless you're like in the lifestyle, you kind of have to be. But a lot of people sort of are like, oh, I don't want to talk about it too early because it might ruin the relationship. And suddenly you've been together for 2 years and you're like, well, actually, I kind of need a dom in a romantic relationship. And can you do that for me? And then it becomes a really high stakes environment where it's like, I have to be okay doing BDSM or not doing BDSM for that matter, or I'm going to lose the relationship. And that is not a place that makes it easy to have open and honest conversations about what needs are and what you are truly comfortable with doing. So please do not pressure people into being doms. Do not go, oh, well, I can tell because you just have such a deep authoritative voice and you're always a leader at work that you're really meant to be a dom. Because only the person that would be the dom knows if they have the capacity or the desire to explore something, to try something, to take on a particular role. And you, as a submissive person, because I'm assuming that's who's having the problem here, you have to be able to hear that no and hear someone say, actually, I don't really want to do this. Because ultimately, what ends up happening? If you drag someone in to being a dom and you convince them and control them and kind of coerce them into doing it, that is not going to be sustainable. And I know that a lot of people really, really want their vanilla-ass monogamous boyfriend to be their master or their dom or whatever, but you can't make someone be something that they are not. And I think it's better to be able to walk away from a relationship where there is a core, unchangeable incompatibility than to potentially traumatize someone and coerce someone into doing something they don't want to do. Because a lot of people, and this also happens where people like agree to do things that are not really something they can do long term. People want to help their partners feel good. They want to maintain a relationship. They want to at least be able to go, okay, well, like, I want to do this because I love you, right? And if I love you, I'd be willing to do this, even if it feels uncomfortable for them. There is certainly a tendency towards self-sacrifice. And that works in some areas, like agreeing to buy crunchy versus smooth peanut butter. But when it comes to having a relationship revolved around a very particular dynamic, either one, it's eventually going to grate away on the person so much that they feel very uncomfortable and kind of used. Or on the submissive end, you can kind of just tell if somebody's not really into it and they're going through the motions and they're like humoring you. Like who wants to submit to someone that is just humoring them because they have to for the relationship? It's just not a healthy position to be in. And if you find yourself there, I think it's much better to have the maturity to know to walk away or to change the parameters of the relationship, decide to just be friends or what have you. So that way you both can have relationships that you feel happy and healthy being in. Of course, there are going to be people, I think even a lot of people, that are like, great, let's try it. I love that idea. Or I'm nervous, but I think it could be really good for our relationship. Like there are going to be people that want to explore and get to know their own inner desires. And there is that more positive side of like wanting to grow in your relationship together and explore this new side that you both are discovering that you have. And that's a much more positive thing. So if it's that way and it's like, we're going to go on this growth journey together and we're going to help each other explore this wonderful new world of BDSM, that's great. That's awesome. But if you have to push and convince someone that they want to be a dom, they probably don't actually want to be a dom. And it's very important to respect those boundaries because submissives can break boundaries. They can be coercive. They can be damaging. And we should not only imagine that only dominants can be the ones that are destructive or disrespectful in relationships, because that does a grave disservice to our community. And I know that I talk about that a lot, but it is worth mentioning here as well because I do think that is very central. So at the end of the day, I do think that there are people that are born dominant, that come out and go, you know, I was tying up my sister's dolls since first grade, and I loved wrestling and tackling the neighborhood kids, and they just know from a really early age that dominance speaks to them. But that is not everyone who is a dominant. There are also people that have to learn how to be dominant. It has to be introduced to them. And again, different pathways, ultimately kind of going to the same place. And it's okay to have something that looks different than what the like stereotypical true domly dom thing is. Like, yeah, some people know right away they have kinky fantasies, and some people just don't. And that's also fine. Like, we don't have this expectation for submissives. We don't think, oh, well, in order to be a true submissive, you have to have submissive fantasies from a young age, and you have to know right away that you're submissive, and you have to be submissive in all your previous relationships. No, we understand that people can be introduced to the concept of submission through a lot of different avenues, be that movies or erotica or fucking Twitter. Like, I don't know. People find stuff from all different kinds of media, all different kinds of conversations. And that doesn't make the subsequent experience of trying that thing less valuable or less real or less true. And I think we should have room in our community for people that come to their ultimate place from different points. And that should be fine. I know we love making fun of people that are like, oh, they found BDSM through 50 Shades of Grey. And it's like, well, if they're in the community and they're learning what aftercare and consent is and what abusive relationships are, awesome. I think that's fine. I have no problem with that. I have a problem with E.L. James. I do not have a problem with people that happen to find our community through certain works or through a relationship or through a YouTube channel. You know, who knows, right? I think that is all perfectly okay. So hopefully you guys can kind of understand what the differences here are between making someone be a dom versus teaching someone or prompting someone to do exploration and develop something that was not previously developed, and someone just innately knowing this is what I am and this is who I want to be. And I think this is a really interesting conversation. I had a lot of fun thinking about this and kind of maybe going at this from a different angle than I would typically think about it. And I would love to know what you all think in a comment down below. Do you think you have to be born as a dom and know from the womb that you want to hold a whip? Or do you think it's okay that you can be taught how to do it later? Is that the same kind of dominance? What about the line between teaching someone and making someone be a dom? I would love to know what you all think in a comment down below, especially if you are someone that started out in a vanilla relationship and then turned it kinky. I would love to know what that process looked like and how you had those conversations. So again, please do share if you'd like to down below. If you have not already and you really enjoyed this, please do consider subscribing to my channel because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related topics. And also, if you want to support what I do, the best way you can do that is with Patreon. A link to that will be down below. If you do already support me there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.